My name's Gloria Karns, Tirone, and I was listening to all the fathers here. My father is the only father that was born in the United States out of all of you.
Nice.
So the story's not as interesting as being in Greece and Italy and all that, but my father was born in a farmhouse that I used to live in. No running water, no toilets. We had to carry in the water. My dad was from a farmer family. Jerry Karns was his dad, and my grandfather, who died of a heart attack when I was 1 year old. And I used to dance for him around the little bench. And he'd go, "Dance, baby doll, dance, baby doll." And I would dance and dance around this little bench. And he had a heart attack and he died. And so my dad, he was 25 years old. So he started helping my mom, because my dad was the only, really, there were two boys in the family, but one was married already. My dad was the only one at home that could really help my grandma do the farm. They raised corn and soybean and wheat, and we had this old 2-story farmhouse, no heat in the house at all. So in the wintertime, it was really cold. And when they finally moved grandma to town, Afton, Iowa, 10 miles away. And then we moved into the farmhouse, and we used to have so much fun.
So what city was this, Mom?
Afton, Iowa.
Afton, Iowa.
We lived on 40 acres outside by Maxburg, Iowa.
So there was no one around you?
No, the closest neighbor was like 5 miles away because of the big farms.
And what did the closest neighbor 5 miles away?
Yeah.
So that's like here to the freeway.
Yeah.
Like the 101 freeway.
That was our closest neighbor. No electricity. My dad brought in electricity, and I remember the day it brought in because we didn't have to have kerosene lamps anymore. We had kerosene lamps, and we had so much fun as our family.
So your dad, what did he farm? Like
soybean, wheat, and corn. And we used to run through the cornfields. I mean, Glenda said, "What do you remember most about the farm?" And it was running through the cornfields. We'd try to find each other. We'd run up and down the aisle of the cornfield. We'd go down to the pond and fish and just do all kinds of things. But it was just the 4 of us, because my little sister wasn't born yet. Sort of like you guys up in the mountain this weekend. See how much fun you had? And we played with a map game, a travel map. We'd play. We didn't have toys or anything. I got a doll for Christmas one year, and ended up breaking her
Tell the
neck.
story about that doll.
That doll?
Yeah.
Yeah, Glenda says it was Christmas Eve, and we were waiting for Santa Claus to come. And so Glenda says, "Wake up, wake up. I think I heard Santa Claus." So we run down. These stairs were like real little stairs, not a big fancy house. It was like we were in an attic, and little stairs that would creak and everything. And Mom and Dad were downstairs in the bedroom, downstairs with Marsha. And Glenda and I ran down the stair, and all of a sudden we heard Dad go, "Get back to bed! Get back to bed!" And so we turned around, and I couldn't believe I had a baby doll. So I ran up the stair, and all of a sudden I dropped the baby doll, and its head cracked in half. Yeah. And so, of course, I was pretty upset. I was probably about your age. But we used to play with buttons and map games. And we
say goodnight.
So how do we say goodnight? Well, this is really funny because I just read in a book another family that did this. And it would be like you guys in this house, but I'll tell you what their house. My mom would usually start and say, "Good night, Gloria. I love you. Good night, Mom. I love you. Good night, Larry." We'd yell real loud, like you guys would be yelling through the house. "Good night, Larry. Love you." Dad would say, "Goodbye. Good night, Larry." Everybody would go, "Good night, Glenda. Good night, Larry. Good night, Gloria. Good night, Marsha." I mean, our whole family would be yelling at each other, "We love you. Good night. Good night." And you know what? This is the truth, and you can hear this story from any of my sisters. We never were mean to each other or called each other names or hit each other. I mean, we were just, you can talk to my sisters, and my brother's dead, but we were just a real happy family, happy for each other when we had each other, because we had each other. That's all we had. And now we're really close, my sisters and I. I mean, I talk to them several times a week. And my little sister calls me godmother because I was 12 years old when she was born. So I used to play with her and she was like my baby. And I call her goddada. And Marcia I call her beautiful one. And Glenda, I call her sis and she calls me little sis. And you can talk to Glenda was just like the greatest big sister. She still is. Just really loving and kind. And I'm just so grateful that we had so much love in our family. And my mom never once in my whole life did she spank me. Not one time. My dad would whack me. My dad would set me straight. And I thank God for that because I needed it sometimes. But I love my mom so much that I couldn't stand to hurt her feelings. So I was always trying to be extra good so I could love my mom. My dad was a hunter. He started hunting when he was 3 years old. And he would go out and hunt raccoons.
His hunting rifle right
Yeah, and guess what? I was his tomboy. And I'd go hunting with him. And we'd go out in the fields at night, every night. And the two of us would take off and go in the fields. Sometimes Glenda would go along too. But I'd get so tired. Sometimes he would just leave me by a tree. And he'd say, okay, I'll be back. Just wait right here. So I'd just sit there by the tree, wait for him to come back. And sometimes he'd be gone a couple hours.
Did you ever get scared?
How old were you?
I was like 7 or 8. I was not very old.
Did you ever get scared?
No, because he always told me he'd come back. Sort of like Ava knew you'd come back for her at the beach, right? Yeah.
Emma.
Emma. And then
Ava at Disneyland.
my dad was a joker. Dad was a real big joker.
Oh.
He'd even tell me dirty jokes. I wouldn't repeat them now. But I used to be his helper, a carpenter. I was his tomboy. We were together a lot. And
That's where you learned your resourcefulness.
probably. And I would go, he'd have part-time jobs on weekends. He was a carpenter. He could build about anything. He was really handy. And I never realized it until tonight. We were snowbirds. Every winter, we would come to California, see Mabel and Doyle, and see Doyle and Helen, and we would come out, and then he'd get a job.
Yeah, because he didn't need a farm during the winter.
No, he didn't need the farm. So we came to California every winter to, we didn't stay with them. We rented a little house. Or a
What
little
part of
apartment.
California?
Petaluma, and then we went down to Orange County and stayed with Mabel and Doyle. I mean, they had a little apartment behind their house, and we stayed there. Mm-hmm. And so we got to see the relatives and the cousins in California, and that's where Michelle was born, in
California.
Petaluma, after we moved out. So we had a sale, and there, if you wanted to move, you would have a farm sale. It was sort of like a big estate sale, only they call them farm sales or whatever. And you'd list everything, even 3 pigs, 4 cows, 5 lambs, tractor. And my dad was the first one to build a cab on top of his tractor when it was cold. And now they have them all the time, the John Deere. But there was never a cabin. He built a wood cab above his cabinet. And yeah, he was a joker. I think that's where I get my joking from. Sometimes Maria doesn't understand.
So that's why you take after your father.
Yeah, I take after my father, but I don't tell dirty jokes. But I do like joking, and I joke with the kids a lot. I told Tessa and Ava the other night that I killed an ant. We had a burial for the ant. And they couldn't figure out how I could bury an ant. Lucas, you want to bury an ant tonight?
So what?
Okay. Yeah.
So what year did you? How old was your dad when you moved to California?
When we had the sale to move out, it was 1954, and we sold everything, and we came out in a little Studebaker car.
So you were 10 years old.
I was 10 years
Did he own the land of the farm?
Yeah, they sold the land.
Do you know what
It's 40
what it
acres.
sold for?
No, Glenda probably knows.
Okay. So he sold everything.
Yeah.
And why did he move to California?
Just for a better life,
For a
better
better life.
climate. He was tired of the farm.
And what did he do when he got to California?
He worked.
Carpenter.
Well, first of all, he worked for. He would go out to the ocean and pick up dead fish for a fertilizer company. Drove a truck. And he'd go out there, and boy, let me tell you something. He'd come home, he would stink like crazy, and he'd have to take his clothes off on the porch because Mom wouldn't let him in the house. And he did that for several years, and then he got a job as a carpenter. And he and I have pictures of the two of us building our house on Gossage Avenue. We built a house. We lived in an old house, and then we moved into 3-bedroom, 1 bath for a long time because we didn't have enough money to buy a toilet for the other one. So all of us, and I never had a room by myself. We always shared rooms, and he loved Thai. And then what happened was they got a little travel trailer, and then they went all over Petaluma, down the river to visit us.
This is when they
when they retired. And they sold Gossage Avenue, and then they moved up in the mountains.
to the mountains, that high place at the very, very high.
Right.
Yeah.
Up in the double mobile home. Boy, and I remember he would go out and hunt for wild boar out there. And you know what wild boar are? Is wild pigs.
Yeah.
And he would take your dad, Phil. Phil had a little gun play rifle. And so here I have movies of this, of Dad in the truck taking Phil out with the little toy gun, and Dad had the big gun, and they went out in the mountains and hunt for anything they could hunt for. And this is when your dad, when we had the Easter egg hunt, he thought we shoot eggs because we went
Easter
hunting.
egg hunt.
Yeah, Easter egg hunt. So you probably thought, what is this? Hunting Easter eggs? I like hunting wild boar, you know. But my dad was a good hunter. What else, Ty, do you remember about him?
Oh God, what a man. I mean, I'll tell you, he was I mean, you know, I didn't have a father because my father died so many years before. So he was like my dad.
Oh, he loved Ty.
And God, we had so much fun together. It's so much fun together. And I remember one time we were with Phil, and we were in his truck, and he got out and he started to run. And man, I mean, you know, he was 60 years old, and he ran like a teenager. And I said, "What are you doing?" He said, "Well, I saw an animal over there, and I just want to go see it." And I'll never forget the way he ran. I couldn't keep up.
Where was this, Dad?
It was up by his when
No.
he lived in what he did was he bought 10 acres of property in the middle of nowhere, and
On the top of a hill.
and the top of the hill, and he had and of course he was a carpenter, so it was easy for him. So he bought a large, brand new mobile home, and they brought it up, and so he finished it.
He
You know,
added on to the big dad.
he finished it. Yeah, because he was a carpenter, and of course he could fix anything. I mean, do anything. And
that's when they sold it.
I mean, I'm going to tell you. So we had this Cadillac, and I'd go up that road. It would take us 10 minutes to get up to the hill because the road was so tough. But he had pickup trucks.
I remember that's where Lacey and I, we were up there one week, and he said, let's go get the chicken. He went to a chicken coop, took it out on a stump,
God.
cut the head off, and they just started bouncing away.
And he had a 360-degree view.
Clean the chicken.
We clean the chicken and eat that chicken.
360
He would raise
degree
chickens
view.
to eat.
Were you scared?
We were like in shock at first. We're like, what the? Because they would bounce nonstop. They'd be running around
Yeah, you cut a chicken's head off, and it bounces all around.
for like a couple minutes.
In fact,
Until the blood gets out.
I love that man.
Oh,
You know, I want to tell you how much I loved him and her mother. When Gloria and I were divorced, okay, I had a business meeting.
Ava,
I
listen.
had a business meeting in San Jose. So I flew up to San Jose for this business meeting, and Gloria and I were divorced. And I rented a car in San Jose and drove an hour and 25 minutes to visit them, to be with them for an hour. and then drove back before I got off my plane. That's how much I love these people.
Yeah, they love
Very
that.
sweet,
Yeah.
Dad.
Oh
And then,
God, I gotta cry
um,
when I think about it.
Then what,
They were wonderful.
they lived in Prescott. When we lived there, they got an apartment, and then they left and moved to Glenda's and spent time. They would just travel around to where all their kids were, just to spend time and get to know the grand people. And they ended up in a rest home at the very end. And my dad, how he passed was, he got up to go to the bathroom, and they think he slipped and hit the wall and had a stroke. And then he was in a coma until, he passed. But he was 86 years old, and that was, he had a long, happy life. He was a very happy child. And one other thing, they didn't really have much church after they got married, but Grandma Karns, his mother, would drive them with a horse and buggy to church every Sunday
In what city?
in Afton, Iowa, when she lived on the farm. All the kids,
They were Methodists.
all of them, 8 of them, would get, all of them would, isn't that cute? All of them would be in the back of that horse and buggy, and my grandmother would drive them to church every Sunday. So they all had really great values. And
They
it was-
must have had some money if they had a horse and buggy, don't you think?
No,
No?
farm. Every farmer they had to get to town.
Oh, good point.
Had
Yeah.
to- yeah.
But I will tell you this: when I
No, this
decided
is a
that
trailer.
when I decided I wanted to marry Gloria, I went up and I said to her, the father, I said, I want to ask your daughter for her hand, and I want to know if it's all right with you. He said, don't bother asking me. You better ask her.
Meaning me.
Yeah.
He was joking. Yeah, he's a joker.
So-
You don't ask me. Ask her if she'll marry you.
How did Grandma Karns and Grandpa Karns meet?
Well, this is the story because my dad was 8 years older than my mom, and she went to school with Grandpa's sister, Helen. And they met, and they'd always talk about, their brother. And so Helen says, I want you to meet my brother. And so they met, and so my dad went daffy over her. And my mom was working for a doctor as a babysitter nanny in Creston, Iowa. She was Beeman. This was Eva Beeman, married to, Walter Beeman was my mom's father. And so they lived in town, and my dad was a farmer, and mom was a city girl. And so she told the doctor, her boss, she was going to get married. And the doctor says, Eva, don't do it. She was 16. The doctor said, don't do it. I'll send you to college. I'll pay for all your school if you don't get married. That's how much he saw mom's benefits. Mom had a lot of brains.
Talent.
Yeah, she had a lot of talent. The doctor could recognize that. So she said to my dad, Glenn, I'm going to go to school and go to college, and I can't marry you. And my dad started crying. And he says, Eva, I don't want to live without you. And so she said, okay, I'll marry you. She didn't have too much brains, huh?
Yeah, she was very emotional.
Oh, she was.
She was very
Very
caring and
loving and
loving.
caring mother, believe me. I'm reading a book right now, Rosemary, and I can't put it down because it's just like my mom. Same values as my mom.
So sweet.
Yeah, and
But
so,
my father-in-law said a couple of things that I'll never forget. I came from the city, and in the city you have all these reporters, and you have the press, and you have the radios, and you have the televisions, and all the smart people from the city. And so we're up there in this, we're visiting up there, and I said, well, look at that smoke, that stack coming out of that. Look at the smoke coming out of that. I forget, it was Kimberly Clark. It was a wood place. And he looked at me and says, hey, it's better that people are working. I'll never forget that. It's better that people are working than to worry about that smoke coming out of that stack. And boy, that really straightened me out because I came from the city where where, you know, I mean, everybody was doing wrong in the world, you know, everybody, because that's the press. The press loves to tear people down. Not my father-in-law. He was always ready to put you know, better people are working.
My dad had a
Let
lot
the
of
smoke come out of
comments.
that Stephen there.
He had
What,
common
Mom?
sense. My dad,
He had common sense.
my mom and dad both. I guess when you're raised on the farm and you don't have a lot of stuff, I mean, you could drop off a baby at my mom's doorstep, and she'd find a way to feed it and clothe it and everything.
Figure it out.
Yeah, she'd figure it out. I think you're that way too, Ava. I think you could do that.
Yeah, all our kids have a lot of common sense.
You could
Any questions regarding Grandpa Karns, Glen Karns? Yeah, Dom, Luke.
So,
Wonderful man.
when could he when you were waiting for him after when he goes hunting and you waited at that tree
Yeah.
at a tree, did he ever come back with like game like?
Oh yeah, he'd come back with raccoon and everything. I just couldn't keep up with him. See what happens when you go to raccoon hunting? You let the dogs go, and the
Yeah.
dogs smell the scent.
Yeah, and then they go and then they
And they go and
trip.
you have to run with them, and you have to run in the middle of the night. You're running after the dogs.
Yeah, and then
They tree him, and then the raccoon crawls up the tree, and then when the dogs bark, and then the raccoon tries to get down, and when it gets down, that's when Grandpa shoots him.
So you were alone, waiting by the tree at night.
Yeah.
Like what time at night? Is it dark?
It'd always be after 9, 10 o'clock. It's dark.
And I have another
One
question.
time I heard a cow, like a bull, and I really had to hide. Yeah, it was pretty scary then.
So what they do? Use the raccoon skins to sell them? Is that what they did?
That's how I was paid, with raccoon skins.
Okay.
My dad we'd eat or give the meat away, and then the skins and the fox was really a good catch. And then they would skin the raccoon skin and put them on boards, and then we'd sell them for like $5 each.
And the thing I remember about Mr. Karns would take the meat
Yeah.
that he couldn't eat because you know there were so many that he would take it down to the black neighborhoods and he would give it to the black people, the extra meat that they couldn't eat themselves, because rather than
Yeah.
you know let
The
the meat go to
hungry
waste.
poor.
Yeah, he was a good man. He went
The
down to the
neighbors.
black neighborhoods and he would give the meat to the black people. Good man, good man. Yeah,
Okay.
good man.
Hold on, Emma. You have a question.
What was his favorite animal to catch? Another hard question.
Well, wild boar, or he would
Fox
also,
or
fox.
Those are wild boar is wild pig
Yeah.
Oh,
with big teeth, fangs.
They love the taste of
pigs
that
so
wild
good.
boar.
Yeah.
Oh,
Could be used
what
like
else?
a knife.
It's like bacon,
Yeah.
ham,
I have a question. Do you like wolf?
pork chops, like
Yeah.
pork
What about
tenderloin,
sheep?
pork everything.
Yeah,
Okay.
we'd eat my sheep. We'd have my pet. My pet was a sheep. I was a little lamb, and we ate it for dinner one night.
That's just sad. That's sad.
Okay.
That's torturing. That's
We had
treason.
pet rabbits. We'd find out we had rabbit stew, and that was my little pet rabbit.
Okay, Luke.
Would you ever hear a gunshot when your dad has caught something?
Oh yeah. Good, got it. He'll be back soon. And here he'd be back. He'd come back, but most of the time I could catch up with him. Most of the time I could, but sometimes I was really tired. I go, Dad, I can't go any further. He said, okay, stay right here. I'll be back. And he'd put me there, and I'd be back.
You said that there's something about fox skin.
Yeah,
It reminded me of my first job in Canada.
yeah.
Was in the fur factory.
Fur factory.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the fox.
And the fox,
The fox
jacket.
skins are like-
The jackets were very
Yes,
expensive.
fox coats, raccoons,
Mink.
bear,
Mink.
Oh,
They
bear.
were doing a lot of.
mink. Oh
Oh.
yeah, he would catch mink.
Yeah.
He really got paid a lot.
What's
for
that?
Yeah, they're
Mink coats.
the most expensive. Yeah.
Mink was a little
like,
animal,
A little animal. It's called a mink.
about this big.
You
Yeah.
gotta get a lot of them.
You have to
make
get a
coat.
lot
Oh
of.
yeah.
And,
for a
but-
coat, for you for the jacket. You
That's
need
why they're
Yeah.
super
for a little
expensive.
jacket. You know, like
In fact, I have a mink coat, and if the kids want to make aprons with fur on it. You can take the mink. I saw it at AJ's. And they were like $50.
Any other questions for Glen Karns?
Glen Karns?
Okay.
Oh, and I have to say one thing. Grandma Karns died just 3 months after Grandpa. So they died
Because
real
of a
close
heart.
together.
Wait, did she die because of a heartbreak?
Probably. She didn't talk too much after Grandpa died.
Oh.
Yeah.
See, that happens with
But I just want to say one thing.
Yeah.
When they lived in when
But they were happy.
they
They
lived
had
down
good
in
life.
Parker, and so I used to go down to Parker all the time to visit them. We did, Gloria and I.
Yeah.
And then they owned a trailer house down there,
I wish we still had it.
and so so I was in Crescent City, and Gloria said, "Hey, I just bought Grandma's. I just bought the trailer house from Grandma and Grandpa." And I said, "Oh, good. What are we gonna do with it?" I said, "I don't know," because they wanted to sell it, and
wanted to
so
move away.
we wanted to make their lives easier. Okay.
So we bought it, but we had a lot of
Yeah.
fun.
I have
down there.
one regret in my life. One regret I have is that I didn't go out and buy a 35-foot motorhome, brand new, and give it to them, because you know what? Let me tell you something. I mean, I had the money in my pocket, and that's what I should have done. I never did that, and I always felt bad about that I didn't do that. But I'll tell you, they were just. So we ended up with their trailer house down there in Parker.
In fact, my mom died the day Yaya's birthday.
Oh, really?
Wow.
January 4th.
Yeah.
Okay, Luke. Luke, question.
That's just weird.
Emma, quiet.
This is
Emma.
about
Emma.
you, Dad, and Grandpa Karns. So, did how much times did you go hunting with him, and did you ever catch anything?
We went, I think, 2 times hunting, or I don't know, when as a kid. As an adult, 2 times, we never caught anything. But we were hunting big game.
Oh, like deer.
The big, multi-point deer.
Oh, dear. Oh,
And
that's
when,
bad.
when they got home one day, and we said, "Well, what'd you catch?" Remember this, Phil? I don't know if you remember this.
I do remember, but I can't
Yeah.
remember.
And they said we didn't get anything. I said, "Oh, thank God."
I'll tell you, one of the saddest days of my life was Grandpa Karns died, and we went back to Ohio somewhere. He was living in Ohio.
Paulding.
Paulding, Ohio. And so anyway, we went back to the funeral parlor, and what happened was after the funeral, I was there, and they took his body, okay, and they put it in the hearse, because they were going to fly him back to California to bury him, okay, and I was standing there, and I'm gonna cry now. Okay?
No, don't.
I was standing there when his body went into the hearse, and they drove away, and I just kept watching and watching and watching until that car, the hearse got further away and further away and further away until I couldn't see it anymore. Yeah, I mean, I tell you, I love that man. I love that man. Oh boy.
So let's have it for Grandpa Karns.
Bravo.